Let's go through and do a little review. Uh, Chapter 3, Section 1 on proprietorships and partnerships and corporations, different forms of business organization. Businesses are formed in three basic types. There is what we call a sole proprietorship, that's one person, partnership, two or more people, and the corporation, which is a legal entity that we will spend a little bit more time on in the next lesson. But for now, let's just take a look at some of these through the Quizlet here, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this. The most common form of business organization in the United States is in the form of a sole proprietorship. And the reason that is because sole proprietorship is the easiest form of business to start. It consists of one person, and as far as the government is concerned, the sole proprietor, the person who owns the business, is essentially the business. It's the same thing. For example, Ross Market downtown is owned by Leah Ross, and as far as the government's concerned, Ross Market is Leah Ross. There is not a separation between the two. Later on, when we talk about corporations, we'll find out that ownership of a corporation is separate from the corporation or from the business itself. So sole proprietorships are very easy to start, and that's why there are so many of them. One of the main disadvantages of a sole proprietorship is that the owner is personally and fully responsible for all losses and debts of the business. Little typo there. And this is known as, I'll give you a hint, it has to do with liability. Another word for responsibility is liability. And if you are responsible for everything, then you have something called unlimited liability. As an owner of a sole proprietorship, if you are taken to court, or if you are sued, you can lose everything, including your personal assets, such as your home. So unlimited liability, you're not protected. Later on, we'll find out in a corporation that corporations have limited liability. But for now, so unlimited liability. This is a type of business owned by two or more persons. And we just talked about that. That would be a partnership. Partnerships are, there's not as many of them for pretty good reasons. You know, if you're going to go into business with somebody, it's essentially like marrying them. And any decisions that each partner makes, the other partner is also responsible for it. It's just like when you get married, if your husband or wife takes that credit card out, spends a lot of money, you cannot claim to the credit card company that it wasn't you that did it, it was your wife that did it. Because once you get married, you are legally partners. And as far as the government's concerned, you are one person consisting of two people. But legally, you are one, and you are both responsible for the debts of your marital union. This is one of the reasons why roommate always says be very careful about who you choose to marry, should you choose to get married. This is a form of business organization. Ugh. Let's try that again. This is a form of business organization recognized by law as a separate legal entity with the ability to sign contracts, pay taxes, and be sued. And this is an example of a corporation. As far as the government's concerned, the corporation is a living person, and the corporation pays taxes, and they can be taken to court and sued in court. For example, Ford Motor Corporation, essentially, as far as the government's concerned, is a person, and the name of that person is Ford Motor Corporation. And so the ownership of that corporation is separate from that legal entity, and that ownership it consists of stock ownership. And so stockholders actually are the owners of the corporation, and the corporation is separate from those owners. Corporation. One of the greatest inventions of all time. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. As far as the quiz goes on Friday, we won't spend too much time on corporations, but keep ourselves limited to partnerships, the advantages and disadvantages of partnerships, and sole proprietorships, once again, advantages, disadvantages, and then maybe talk a little bit, a few questions about the franchise form of business and some of the unique characteristics of that that help alleviate some of the problems that can occur when you start your own business and you're not really sure what you're getting into, and a franchise can help pave the path, the road to success, or at least to make your chances a little more probable. A government document that gives permission to create a corporation. Once again, we're going to talk more about this later. That's known as a charter. And this form of stock represents basic ownership of a corporation, and this is common stock. This form of stock, non-voting form of stock, we're going to talk more about this. We're looking at preferred stock. And so what I do in this first section is that we split up and separate the corporations from the partnerships and the proprietorships, just because there's just so much more to it as far as the corporations go. This is a major disadvantage of the partnership form of organization. Limited life. If one of the partners dies, the partnership dies, and you have to reform the partnership. Also, if one of the partners leaves, then you have to reform. So it has limited life. It does not go on and on forever. A corporation does. We'll talk more about that later. This is a big advantage of the corporate form of business ownership. Ease of raising money, or what is called financial capital. And by the way, just as a preview, that is done by selling stock. There are other ways that corporations raise money, but one of the main reasons is that they sell stock within the corporation. With this type of stock, the stockholder does not have voting rights, preferred stock. In California, this office holder is in charge of issuing a corporate charter. They are not easy to obtain and often require the help of a lawyer, and that is the Secretary of State here in California that is responsible for issuing charters, a charter permission to operate a corporation within California. And our last one. This is a form of liability in which the owner can only lose the amount of his or her investment in the business, and that is limited liability. And that's a big advantage of a corporation, is that you can be an owner in a corporation and have limited liability. So there's a quick run through of Quizlet for section 3-1, and we will focus and spend more time talking about corporations. And what you'll want to do as far as the note guide goes and getting ready for your quiz is to make sure you understand some of the advantages and disadvantages of the sole proprietorship and the partnership.